During the early 14th century, much of modern-day Albania was governed by the Serbian king Stefan Dusan. When he passed away in 1355, local chieftains and lords became the dominant factors managing their estates. Albania fragmented. Another external force contributed to the general instability. The Balkans and Eastern Europe as a whole suffered under Ottoman raids and conquest. By 1396, they conquered key cities and territories, including the capital of the Second Bulgarian Empire. The Ottoman Sultan and military commanders figured fragmented Albania would be an easy conquest. However, ironically, the Ottomans faced some of the most fierce resistance from the Albanians. The celebrated Albanian commander and Ottoman deserter George Kastrioti united the fragmented chieftains and princes. Better known as Skanderbeg, he led one of the longest and most successful rebellions against the mighty Ottoman Empire, using the mountainous territory and guerrilla tactics to keep his head above water, against all odds. John Kastrioti was an Albanian lord living in the early 15th century. The wealthy, noble Albanian house of Kastrioti governed a significant chunk of territory in current-day northern Albania and bordering Macedonia and Kosovo. In 1405, John had a son, George Kastrioti. This boy was born either in Dibër or Kruje into a large Orthodox family. For decades, Albanian nobles resisted the ever-expanding Ottoman Empire. George's father was no different. He successfully fought several military campaigns. However, when in 1421 Murad II's numerically superior army beat him, they captured George and 3 of his brothers, forcing John to become a vassal. The boys were transported to Edirne, the capital of the Ottoman Empire. George converted to Islam. According to Turkish chroniclers, the boy showed a great talent for military matters and strategy, was dexterous and intelligent. He left a good impression at the court, and as a son of an Ottoman vassal, the Sultan allowed him to receive a military education. Distinguishing himself at military school, his name was changed to Iskender, referring to Alexander the Great. Although historiography loses sight of his whereabouts for a few years, it is safe to assume he participated in military campaigns of the Ottomans. Somewhere along his military service, George received the title Bey, meaning as much as chieftain, often given to military commanders. The name Skanderbeg would later, by the Albanians, be morphed to Skanderbeg. And with his name, he would enter history, becoming one of the greatest Albanian heroes. While he served the Ottoman Sultan, his father John still participated in resistance efforts against the Ottomans, who had occupied large parts of his original territories. He took part in the unsuccessful Albanian revolt of 1432. 5 years later, John passed away and the Ottomans annexed all his territories. The Sultan appointed Skanderbeg as the Subash, a sort of commander of the Vilayet Kuya, a central administrative district. Skanderbeg maintained his father's network as the Subash, including contacts with Albanian nobles and the Republic of Venice, Naples, and Ragusa. These contacts would come in handy later in life. According to some historians, from this point onward, Skanderbeg was already rallying support for his defection and eventual Albanian revolt, although much is unknown about this period. Meanwhile, several European leaders joined forces to drive the Ottomans out of the region entirely. The leading figure of these campaigns was the talented Hungarian commander János Hunyadi. In March 1442, he defeated an Ottoman force under Mezid Bey at Hermannstadt and fended off the subsequent retaliation. Then, planning a greater offensive, Hunyadi established alliances with the Balkan peoples to rise up behind enemy lines. Building on this momentum, in January 1443, Pope Eugene IV announced what would become known as the Crusade of Varna, rallying several kings and commanders to expel the Ottomans from Europe. In November that year, the Hungarians crossed the Danube, making their way to the city of Niš. 3 separate Ottoman armies faced Hunyadi's cavalry. Qasim Pasha commanded the Ottomans, with 3 beys, among whom a certain Albanian nobleman and his nephew, Hamza Kastrioti. Heavy fighting broke out, with 5 total battles fought, upon which the Ottomans were defeated and retreated, but not Skanderbeg. Instead of retreating with his army, together with 300 Albanian cavalrymen and his nephew, he deserted. After a trek of several days, the group arrived in Dibër, one of John's former territories. Realizing his desertion would lead to a violent Ottoman response, Skanderbeg now did his best to rapidly establish a strategically favorable stronghold. The most challenging part would be expelling Ottoman forces from the Kruje fortress, as it was near impossible to take by force. So instead, Skanderbeg forged a decree pretending the Sultan appointed him as Subash of the fort, convincing its governor to let him in. Then, during nighttime, he snuck in his soldiers hiding in the surrounding woods and exterminated the Ottoman garrison. Upon victory, Skanderbeg raised his family herald, the two-headed eagle, above Kruja's fortress. To this day, it remains the Albanian national flag. Historians generally agree this moment marks the beginning of Skanderbeg's 2.5-decade-long revolt against the Ottoman Empire. He denounced the Prophet and Sultan and continued his expansion campaign, reconquering his family's territories. Within a month, he possessed most of his father's castles, cities, towns, having expelled all Ottoman garrisons, and proclaimed an independent Albanian principality. Seeing Skanderbeg's success, other Albanian nobles now rose against the Ottoman invaders as well, and by January 1444, they expelled all Ottoman troops from Albanian territory altogether. In March, the Cathedral of Lezhë, Albanian nobles declared Skanderbeg their official leader, establishing the so-called League of Lezhë. This pooling of resources became the core of Albanian resistance against the Ottoman Empire. All territories and their nobles remained autonomous, but were united in the common cause of defending Albania, with Skanderbeg as their commander-in-chief. Once elected by the Albanian nobles, Skanderbeg began setting up a mobile army and increasing fortresses and barriers on their territories, waging a form of guerrilla warfare with units that could rapidly disperse and using the mountainous areas to pester Ottoman forces. Using a considerable number of newly erected fortresses, the Ottomans could do nothing but spread their forces thin. Thanks to their familiarity with the region and mountain passes, Albanians employed hit-and-run tactics, severely impeding the heavily armored and unfamiliar Ottomans. Skanderbeg's continued resistance becomes all the more impressive because even generous estimates say the number of troops he commanded never exceeded 20,000, a marginal sum compared to the enormous Ottoman armies. The first clash happened in summer 1444, after Hunyadi's successful long campaign, but forced retreat due to the lack of supplies and bad weather. The Sultan had diverted his attention to Albania after Hunyadi's retreat. At Torvioli, Ali Pasha entered Albania at Dibra, commanding 25,000 troops. Using deception tactics, Skanderbeg lured Pasha's forces into the narrow Torvioli plain before trapping them with hidden troops and launching a devastating attack. The Sultan's retaliation wasn't immediate, because in November, at the Battle of Varna, Ottoman forces decisively defeated crusading armies commanded by King Vladislav III and Hunyadi. The king was slain. Part of the reason for the defeat was that the Serbian George Brankovic, doubling as the father-in-law of Sultan Mehmed II, blocked Skanderbeg from sending aid to his Christian allies. The victory at Varna secured the Ottoman position in the Balkans for centuries to come. It was one of the reasons why Christian commanders didn't come to the aid of the besieged Constantinople in 1453. It was a watershed moment, convincing the Christians of their inability to expel the Ottomans to Anatolia. After their victory at Varna, the Ottomans began concentrating their forces against Skanderbeg once again, although he managed to aptly use the mountainous area and his guerrilla tactics to hold out. He was successful in defeating 2 Ottoman campaigns before being left alone in 1447. Having a keen eye for strategy and politics, Skanderbeg made use of this breathing room to foster new alliances. Learning of a rebellion in the Kingdom of Naples, he actually came to the aid of its king, Alfonso V. As a sign of gratitude, Alfonso allowed Albanians to settle in southern Italy and pledged troops to help the rebellion. However, in practice, these were marginal at best. Naples wasn't the only state on the Italian peninsula Skanderbeg dealt with. North of the Kastrioti territories lay the Ducagini family estate. The Ducaginis and Venice feuded about the possession of the Dagnum fortress. Being an ally of the Ducagini, Skanderbeg launched attacks on multiple Venetian cities along the Albanian coastline to pressure them. Venice sent a relief force and diplomatic envoys to the Ottomans, urging them to launch attacks against Skanderbeg's positions. Venice even put a bounty on Skanderbeg's head, but to no avail. Sultan Murad II received the Venetian envoys and figured it was time to crush the Albanian thorn in his side. So, in spring 1448, a force numbering over 80,000 soldiers under direct command of the Sultan marched into Albanian territory. They first besieged the fortress of Svetigrad, defended by an over 10 times smaller garrison. After setting up the siege, part of the garrison marched onto Kruja. Skanderbeg had to act quick. In July, rallying local farmers and the League, he defeated Venice at the Battle of Drin. He left his nephew Hamza, the one he defected with, at Drin to guard the outpost and took all his other troops to relieve Svetigrad. Over there, although outnumbered, the small Albanian fortress resisted continued attacks. Employing guerrilla tactics, Skanderbeg's troops pestered the Ottomans. However, when they discovered the water source of the fortress, it was a done deal. In the autumn, the garrison had to surrender. When a 15,000-strong force under Mustafa Pasha entered Albania via Dibra, Skanderbeg's outnumbered forces defeated them at Uranik. Learning of this Ottoman defeat, the Venetians decided to sign a peace treaty. The Sultan abandoned his march on Kruja after learning of Hunyadi's plans to launch a new campaign into Ottoman territory, burning many fields and villages on his way. From then on, Venice left Skanderbeg alone. He, in turn, could fully concentrate his efforts against the Ottomans, still vying for control in and around his territories. In October, the Hungarians fought the Second Battle of Kosovo. Once again, the Serb Brankovic blocked Skanderbeg's forces from coming to his allies' aid, and Hunyadi's troops were badly beaten. Having dealt with Hunyadi, the Sultan concentrated as many soldiers as he could spare against the Albanian lord. In May 1450, rallying over 100,000 Ottoman troops, Murad II himself commanded the army that would lay the first siege of Kruja. Count Vrana and 1,500 men defended the fortress, while Skanderbeg and 8,000 troops retreated to the Gumanishti mountains to the north. As soon as the Ottomans entered Albania, they were harassed by peasants using the hills for quick getaways. And if there weren't attacks on the main Ottoman force, Albanians heavily attacked supply lines. Skanderbeg's troops too harassed Ottoman garrisons around the fortress and their supply caravans. Using small contingents of troops, he managed to throw the Ottomans' besiegement in such chaos that after half a year they lifted the siege altogether. 3 months later, the Sultan passed away and was succeeded by his son Mehmed II, but trouble was brewing within the League. Skanderbeg grew more confident as his success continued. With Albania facing widespread famine due to the continuous war, he began infringing on the rights of nobles quartering in their castles and making more demands of their troops. Two significant families broke away not soon after the siege of Kruja, the Dukagins and the Arianids. To smooth things over, Skanderbeg married George Arianid's daughter, but other nobles didn't just abandon the League, but they in fact joined the Ottomans, taking up arms against their own country. One nephew of Skanderbeg sold the Modric fortress to the Ottomans. Hamza defected to the Ottomans after Skanderbeg had a son, making him not eligible as a successor. Meanwhile, Skanderbeg himself continued strategizing. To liberate the south of Albania, he planned the besiegement of the citadel of Berat. Supported by Albanians and 2,000 Neapolitan infantry sent by King Alfonso, the initial besiegement appeared to be a success. But unbeknownst to Skanderbeg, the Albanian defector Moise Golemi, commanding a 40,000-strong Ottoman force, secretly crossed the Albanian border and surprised the troops laying siege. They defeated the Albanians, but at the subsequent Battle of Dibra, Skanderbeg's reinforcements defeated the Ottomans again, and Moise once again switched sides to Skanderbeg, remaining loyal to him until his death. Later that year, over 80,000 Ottoman troops commanded by General Isak Bey, Yevrenos and Hamza, appointed by Sultan Mehmed II himself, crossed into Albania. However, at the plain of Albulena, the Albanians lulled the Ottomans into a false sense of security before launching a surprise attack. With just 8,000 men, they defeated the 10 times larger Ottoman army, inflicting significant damage and capturing Hamza Kastrioti. He would spend the rest of his days as a prisoner in Naples. Skanderbeg's victory once again earned him praise around Europe, and after Hunyadi's death in 1456, he became the face of anti-Ottoman resistance. In 1458, his ally King Alfonso of Naples died and was succeeded by his son Ferdinand. The Neapolitans rebelled against Ferdinand, upon which Skanderbeg decided to help the young king. He concluded a 3-year truce with the Ottomans. In Italy, at Barletta and Trani, Skanderbeg defeated the rebels and helped Ferdinand maintain his throne. While in Naples, Skanderbeg received intelligence from his many agents dispersed throughout the Balkans that the Sultan was in fact planning to break the truce and launch an extensive invasion. By the time he returned, 3 separate expeditions were already in Albanian territory. He swiftly crushed all 3. The Sultan now offered Skanderbeg to sign a peace treaty for a decade, which he in fact accepted. They signed it in April at Shkup. But when it seemed a period of peace commenced, organizers of a crusade embodied by Pope Pius II sent Skanderbeg a message. They were about to launch their campaign and wanted him to join. He initially refused, but that summer war broke out between Venice and the Ottoman Empire. Albanian nobles swore loyalty to Skanderbeg again, and the Pope confirmed the crusade was to begin. So, in November, Skanderbeg once again entered into war against the Ottomans. When the Pope died in August next year, before his forces gathered, it came to a fruitless end. But the war didn't end for the Albanians, who now faced an angry and very distrusting Sultan. Under the command of Balaban Pasha, 5 separate expeditions were sent into Albania to destroy Skanderbeg's resistance. They entered during harvest season, and due to the harsh winter, Albania faced severe famine. Yet time and time again, at Baikal, Mesat, Kashari and Kruja, Balaban's troops were defeated. Troops were pestered by guerrilla bands of peasants and Albanian troops hiding in the mountains into the land. But Skanderbeg's resources were spreading thin, and he had to visit Naples, Venice and Rome mid-war to try and find funds to continue his war, all to no avail. In April, he returned to Albania to lift the second siege of Kruja, killing Balaban Pasha in the ensuing melee. But by winter 1468, another Ottoman army entered Albania from the north of Shkodër. Skanderbeg commanded the army en route to meet them, but contracted a fever due to the weather. While his forces gained a victory near Shkodër, George Kastrioti Skanderbeg passed away on January 17, 1468 at the age of 62. His men buried him in the Cathedral of Legia, and his 14-year-old son John succeeded him. Soon it became clear no leader was up to the task of leading the Albanian resistance. After Skanderbeg's death, the Ottomans took less than a decade to conquer Skanderbeg's territories altogether. In 1478, Kruja fell to the armies of Mehmed II, and Venetian Legia too fell a few years later. Thank you very much for watching this video. If there's a topic or event you would like to know more about, let me know your thoughts in a comment. I would also really like to thank all my patrons and channel members for their generous support. If you enjoy House of History and want to support my work, consider joining me on Patreon. For just $1 a month, you already gain access to the exclusive Patreon series. Don't forget to subscribe. See you next time.